Hey everyone! In this video let's review WiZmans World Retry. If you wonder about an English localization, don't worry, this moron didn't know it was going to be launched on this side of the lake. And what can I say? So, for those interested, seems like the release date is going to be March 13th. This game was originally launched for the DS back in 2010, but it didn't leave Japan until some days around the corner. The company that developed WiZmans was Lancarce. Chances are that you know them because of games like Etron Odyssey and Shin Megami Tensei A Strange Journey. Yes, they helped Atlus all those years back. As for newer releases, we can talk about the Diofield Chronicle. The funny thing here is that City Connection acquired the rights from, I don't know how to say it, Jaleco? The company that originally published WiZmans World. And that pretty much led us to a remaster several years later. Now, I don't want to dive so much into this whole mess because that topic alone can take a long harsh video on its own. In any case, don't worry about the spoilers. I'll only explain what is found on the surface and things like that. Without further ado, let's begin. Story-wise, everything starts with a small chat between Giselle and Adam, where the main topic is about a young boy that was found by Giselle. However, Adam was kinda surprised, as they don't tend to talk that often, so he was hesitant if she had the boy or if it was created. But after hearing he was found, then Adam supposes he is from outside. The news seems impossible, as this city hasn't been in contact with the outside world for over 100 years. In a summarized way, let's say that they are surrounded by dungeons, and despite going on multiple expeditions, they've never found a way out. So you may imagine their surprise if a little boy was found in the forest. So Giselle pretty much tells Adam that she is going to take care of the boy, so he can explain how he reached this place. Nonetheless, Adam doesn't like the idea, as he knows she's going to treat him as an experiment. Without much else, she lives with the boy, and that is how many years passed. What is intriguing about this place is that the dungeons around the city start to transform in grotesque ways, slowly losing their vitality, which made things harder, as it was constantly changing, or in other words, collapsing. A scene later, we get to see a grown-up Klaus, the new wizard to venture into this weird place, in an attempt to find a way outside. Unfortunately, Giselle wasn't able to see Klaus off, as she ventured into the dungeon, but hasn't been seen since then. Which is surprising, as she is a great magician. In any case, the main objective is to investigate the dungeons. Once entering the first dungeon, Klaus finds Matilda, a quite charismatic girl who explains him certain things about these areas. After advancing a bit, we will notice that this is no place to tackle alone, as monsters start to surround Klaus. While escaping, something like fairies got close, as he smells like Giselle. Without thinking too much, they help distracting the monsters, so they can talk. This is how we get to know three homunculi, who will assist Klaus in this crusade: Aen, Doe, and Tori. These three homunculi had to leave Giselle's side little after they were created, as they were attacked by a monster. However, on their case, she worked as decoy. What they know is that Klaus can help them to become powerful by acquiring different anima and turning them into those monsters. So this is pretty much how we begin. And as we advance, we will get to know more about the world around us, why the dungeons began to collapse at a rapid rate, and what we need to do to escape from this place. In general, I will say that the story is quite entertaining and original with this concept, but it is also fair to mention that it is rough around the edges, due to the kind of interactions you will have as you advance. Ultimately, considering ideas, progression, and how things change after a certain point, I believe it is a good story. An 8 is good enough. At the end of the day, I enjoy the cast of characters and how everything starts to make sense. Gameplay-wise, we will have to traverse the multiple dungeons, in this kind of top-down view, where there are no random encounters, but these little sprites that represent the enemies. What is worth mentioning is that sometimes they appear in good numbers and start to chase you, or sometimes they can move around in erratic ways, turning them into almost sure encounters. Just don't let them touch your back, for obvious reasons. Worst case scenario, they will own your arce in a couple of turns. Whatever the case, this is not an easy RPG, meaning that if you just try to proceed the story, most likely enemies in the second half of the dungeon will beat the heck out of you without that much of an issue. Now, there are ways to farm experience and items, but I'll let you find those things on your own. Within these dungeons, there are some chests that contain important items to activate, let's say, checkpoints. And, as the dungeons can collapse as you advance, I recommend you to look for them before you advance too much. And yes, you heard me right. In the moment one of these dungeons collapses, the layout you previously traveled disappears, sometimes erasing paths or adding others. But don't worry that much, in general these dungeons are easy to traverse. Now, combats in WiZmans aren't that complicated, at least in essence. Your characters will appear on this timeline. So what's important to notice is that the speed affects this thing the most, so try to be careful with the buffs, while going a la Shin Megami Tensei, in case you want to keep control of the fights, because as you repeat turns, your moves will become stronger, being able to finish powerful enemies in few turns. What's cool is that you don't need to worry about healing your characters, because you will recover HP and the MP. The homunculi are the ones that do not recover SP until they increase a level or you go to sleep. But I'll take the idea, because otherwise you would most likely have to go back and forth like there's no tomorrow. And don't worry if one of your characters fall in combat, after it they revive, so there is no big deal, aside from the experience, cause they won't get any point. Aside from that, there isn't that much else, because Klaus will learn new moves as he levels up, but your homunculi need souls, that way you can upgrade their stats, moves, and role within the team. All I can recommend is try to keep a decent balance. You know, the usual drill with these kinds of games where you have a certain freedom. In any case, once you choose a souls for these girls, you can add some extra stats. These items will be obtained after fighting, and around the dungeon. That is another reason to explore, because oftentimes you can get interesting options to add some extra attack, defense, HP, and so on, giving you more options to further specialize each homunculus. Now, a kind of test to check if you're more or less up to the challenges you will find, it is to initiate combat with sub-bosses, which appear with a bigger sprites. Chances are that in your first fights, things will go sour. This will give you a decent idea if it is okay to go after the bosses, or if you need to level up a tiny bit, because these bosses are quite relentless, using moves that can damage every character, plus status elements, debuffs and so on. So yeah, I won't deny that they handed me a couple of times. I will say that the gameplay is a 7.5. For turn-based systems, to me, it is above decent. Beware that it is slightly grindy. You can use my test for the RPGs to get a decent idea of what is going to be thrown at you. In the graphics section, I check glitches, performance, aesthetics, and other visual things. This is the Switch version of the game, played on the Switch 2. I had no issues with it getting close, so it should be okay. I don't think they are going to mess things in the localization, unless it turns into another 7 saga. It is worth mentioning that I didn't experience drops or any problem in detriment of the experience, which is cool. Now, what's amazing about this remaster is that sprites, scenarios, and other things were improved. It is a nice change for what was originally received in the DS, and I gotta say that the sprites fit quite well in this world. There's a lot of life around the dungeons, as there is a great detail in things like shadows, water, general movement, and how things change with each collapse, turning certain things into something much more grotesque or lifeless in a sense. In a certain way, I can say something similar about the enemies. In general, they were of my liking. I mean, you begin fighting little animals like rats, rabbits, and stuff like that, and later you fight some hideous beast, which makes a huge contrast between one another. And it is cool that your partners take a similar look to what they fuse with. It is nice to see how they change along the whole journey. To me, the graphics are an 8. I don't usually give these scores to these kinds of games, but I don't want to further explain why. For those who have followed the channel for a while, most likely you know which ones are my complaints and also why I most likely liked it. And then last but not least, the music. Now, when I saw the list of composers, I didn't believe it. The original soundtrack for the DS was composed by Kenichiro Iwasaki. Most of his works, I will say, are kinda niche. Chances are that you know them because of games like Sankey Zero or The Legend of Kage 2. Personally, I got to know his compositions because of another Japan-exclusive games, and all I gotta say is that it is unfortunate, but the DS audio doesn't do that much justice to his work. But this is where things get interesting, because similarly as the graphics, multiple things were changed here, and I am definitely glad because in this remaster they kept the same essence while improving the quality. In general, most compositions were simply enhanced, but some of them were changed. That is where boss tracks come into play, as they were composed by Soli. Soli is a collaboration between Isao Fujita, the guitarist from Baby Metal. As a side note, I like the instrumentals, not that big fan of the voices, but this gives a decent idea to what they sound. And Saori Hoshino, a violinist who plays rock and metal. She has worked on some animes like Re:Zero, Kantai Collection, Kagero Project, and so on. As another side note, I recommend you to listen to the releases, they are really good. With this, just listen to this killer boss track. All I gotta say is that this OST is superb. If I reduce some points, it is because certain parts of the audio feel a bit repetitive while in combat, and that you cannot fully experience some dungeon tracks because of encounters and collapses. Aside from that, this is a beautiful OST worth a try, even if you don't play the game. To me, it is a 9. WiZmans' World Retry final score is an 8.1. I believe it was a good game, but it is worth mentioning that if you're not that big of a fan of multiple encounters and kinda difficult boss fights, chances are that you will struggle with this title, as it can be a bit punishing. Aside from that, in general, expect to see good executions for what is a remaster of a DS game. I hope you found this video informative, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.